assured me that it's all in. Yes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, thank you very much for coming here this evening. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Nicholas Cobb. I'm chairman of the Westminster Russia Forum. For those of you that are new to the forum, we founded the forum back in 2012, and as basically as a grassroots group to really foster better relations between the Russian Federation and the United Kingdom in the areas of culture, business, and of course politics. So we hold a number of events over the year, and if you'd like to know anything about the organisation, you have these shiny postcards on your thing which will give you the web address as well. So the format of this evening is, well, first of all I'd like to start off on the tone of the event. It's often difficult to find two relatively controversial topics, Russia being one of them. It'll always have its supporters and its detractors, and also Brexit. So we combining the two here tonight, and of course where there are challenges, there are also great opportunities. And that's really a theme that we're exploring today. We're also trying something a little bit different tonight, in the sense that we're streaming this event live. So we would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of those that are following us online, and certainly suggest that you make your comments and feelings known in the various comment boxes appeared on Facebook or on the website. So absolutely, if we can answer the questions for you, we'll do that for you after the event itself. So without much further to do, the format for tonight, we're going to have an opening 5-minute discussion from each of the speakers, and then we're going to move into an extended questions and answers session. So absolutely, any questions you have, I'm sure the panel will be delighted to hear from you. I'm not going to speak for too much longer. I'm going to allow the panelists to introduce themselves. But first of all, I'd like to introduce Anna Jenner from the Russian National Tourist Office, Sergei Averin from the Russian Federation Chamber of Commerce, Ben Wells from the law firm here today, and I would also like to thank him very much for the gracious use of his offices, which you can't beat the location. Kawczynski MP, Deputy Chairman of the All-Parliamentary Group for Russia, and last but by no means least, we have Steve MacVicar from the Eurasian Business Briefings. So we're going to start off the panel debate. Please save the questions to the end until we're ready. And first of all, we're going to start over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm a solicitor here at Shepherd and Wedderburn and working in the Commercial Disputes Department. And I will be covering trade agreements. What I'm going to be speaking about very briefly is the history of trade between Russia and the UK, and also how to bring a trade agreement into force in the UK. A trade agreement in general is intended to govern trade between two bodies and can really help to increase the value and also the volume of trade. However, prior to the 18th century, it was actually pretty standard to restrict trade via tariffs, imports and restrictions, and on complete bans to foreign goods. And I'm pretty sure that we're all aware that does live on in some respect even to this day. It was only really the work of economists such as this gentleman here, Adam Smith, who came up with the doctrine of free trade. And moving on from that, we have the World Trade Organization. You can see here a meeting in 1998 in Geneva, and the World Trade Organization's membership now stands at 164 countries. This is a fantastic organization. It brings a global standard to these agreements. However, what we found in recent years is that it's really difficult to reach consensus. I think, as some of you will have seen with the discussions in Doha, they still haven't managed to reach a consensus. And in fact, attention has really turned back to bilateral and multi-regional agreements, such as the ones I think we're going to be talking about here today. Going back to the history of trade between UK and Russia, it's quite interesting how it all began. You can see here there's a red line going up from England all the way over to Scandinavia into Russia, and that was a journey made by what became the Muscovy Company, with the initial aim of finding the northeast passage to China. In fact, they came to Russia and made a journey 600 miles into Russia to go and meet with Ivan IV, aka Ivan Grozny, or Ivan the Terrible. We have a picture here of one of the people from the Muscovy company being shown Ivan's treasures at that day, and they were given the sole rights to trade with Moscow, which was a really good opportunity for both groups, considering that Moscow was landlocked at the time and didn't have access to the Black Sea, which it holds with such high regard at the moment, and we can see why. There were some ups and downs in trade during this period, but it remained very strong until the Cold War. And at the moment, the UK and Russia are major trading partners, despite the 2014 sanctions. As I'm sure we're all aware, the UK is a major destination for Russian investment, and especially London, where we are today. So, how do we bring a trade agreement into force in the UK? Well, it involves the relevant government department or a bespoke team. So, for example, it could be the Department for International Trade, or you could have a team which is assembled. However, the Foreign Office absolutely has to be involved. It doesn't dictate the substance of a deal, but it does watch the language used, and it deals with all of the procedural steps. So the department or team negotiating also has to have authority to do so. Authority is automatically held by several members of state. Question to the floor: can anyone tell me a person who would automatically be authorised to negotiate on behalf of the UK? Yes, exactly. Mrs. May is one of them. This lady, lovely lady, is also another lady who has authority. And thank you very much, Guy. Theresa May comes up straight after her. And indeed, also certain government ministers, such as this chap with the lovely haircut. So the actual trade negotiators will need to be given powers delegated to them in a document called full powers. And that allows them to negotiate. It's drafted by the Foreign Office and then brought into force by our good friend Boris here. So once negotiated, the next steps are to adopt the treaty. It just means to agree on the wording. Secondly, to authenticate the treaty, which is to sign it, and then it goes on to indicate a desire to be bound. Now, in the UK generally, there was no requirement to ratify treaties. However, we've had regulations in 2010, which means they do have to be put before both Houses of Parliament for a period of 21 days. And if there's no objection, then they are ratified. However, there can be informal political pressure, which can mean some renegotiation needs to be done. So, in conclusion, both countries are WTO members, so one would hope there will be very few trade barriers between the two countries. Having a think about it, I thought that also potentially any final deal could be a multilateral one, including the Eurasian Economic Union, which might be a nice idea to give that extra element to the future deal brought forward. And looking at the picture here, this was G20 this week, where Theresa May has been putting the UK forward as a leader in global world trade. So on the basis of this, and clearly she's had a very nice time meeting President Putin as well, I really hope that there are good things to come between trade between the UK and Russia.
Thank you very much, Ben. Right, let's move on to Sergei.
I love the last picture Ben showed us. It's a great picture. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here today. Thank you, Nick, for inviting me. And it's my pleasure to say a few words. Oh, sure, no problem. I'm a representative of Chamber of Commerce and Industry of the Russian Federation, and I've been working as a representative of my chamber in London for almost 2 years, and actually I have realized myself that not many of you, ladies and gentlemen, know what my organization does. And the CCIRF is often being mixed with governmental structures of the Russian Federation, such as Ministry of Economic Development or Trade Mission of the Russian Federation. And sometimes we are being mixed with Russo-British Chamber of Commerce. We love RBCC, and it is a centenary year for this organization, and this organization is a natural partner of my chamber, and there's supposed to be my colleague, Matt Proudman from RBCC, but I don't see him here. But anyhow, those of you, ladies and gentlemen, who want to know more about RBCC's activities, its centenary events, you may also talk to me after that. The Chamber of Commerce and Industry of the Russian Federation is the biggest non-governmental, non-profit member-based organization in Russia. It is an umbrella organization for regional chambers of commerce in Russia. At this point, it is quite similar, and it can be compared to BCC, which is the British Chambers of Commerce. The difference is that we unite 180 chambers, regional chambers, which is 3 times bigger number than BCC does. Altogether, we promote businesses of 50,000 members, large, medium, and small enterprises all over Russia. I do also need to say that main sources of income of CCRF are membership fees. Its activities in promoting companies, events, income from daughter companies such as Exhibition Center, World Trade Center Moscow, which are located in the center of the city, a patent bureau, and so on. So we are not government funded. We are not funded by government, which is very important. The Chamber of Commerce of Russia is the organization you should bear in mind and be aware of when thinking of starting or expanding your business in Russia. Brexit, from the Russian business point of view, doesn't mean any stress for the Russians at all. Generally speaking, a Russian exporter or importer should be preparing a separate set of documents to send or receive goods from or to the UK, nothing more. When prices are compatible, Brexit doesn't bring itself any harm to the business. At the same time, Brexit gives new opportunities for us to find partners in the UK, because British businesses are no more in the European single market economy. They are more likely will talk business to partners outside Europe, including Russia, which is of course good. So I stress it once again, Brexit by itself means no harm to the UK-Russia business development. Instead, it brings optimism for the future. And you're very welcome to do business in Russia. Don't wait while others are doing it, like Germans, like Italian. We're very proud of it, but we are looking for you guys. And we will help you to do this. I would also like to recall that there are 2 major events have been planned for this year. The first one is RBCC Centenary Regions to Regions Business Forum in London on 27th of September. A senior delegation of heads of Russian regional chambers of commerce will attend the forum. I will open you a little secret. There will be a president of my chamber, Chamber of Commerce and Industry of the Russian Federation. And there will also be 14 presidents and directors of regional chambers of commerce. So it's a great opportunity for you, ladies and gentlemen, to meet these people. And the second event is RBCC's Russia Talk Investment Forum in Moscow on 26 October, which the Russian Chamber is holding for the 12th time. So you're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sergei. Okay, Daniel.
Thank you. Well, I sit on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and I'm the Deputy Chairman of the Friendship Group with Russia. But I'm the first ever Polish-born British Member of Parliament. So I was born in Warsaw, and we came over to the United Kingdom in 1978. And what I find fascinating, I think this is a little bit of human psychology, is that because I was transplanted from Poland to live in Britain, I'm a bit of a hybrid. And I don't think, like the Poles, Polish politicians tend to be very suspicious of Russia, very confrontational, and very fearful of Russia. And I don't think like the British politicians either, who are also rather skeptical and rather confrontational towards Russia and suspicious of Russian motives. But why am I interested in Russia? It's because I used to go back to Poland a great deal in communist times to see my grandfather, and spent many, many hours listening to him about his experiences of the Second World War and what happened to Warsaw and what happened to Poland during that catastrophic war, and the suffering and misery that he went through, but that all Poles went through at this tragic time. And my goal is very simple. I just want to prevent war at all costs. I've seen what happened to Poland 60, 70 years ago with the sort of technology that they had at that time. And my grandfather described very vividly to me the consequences. And I genuinely fear and worry as to what would happen to Poland. It won't be Britain that necessarily suffers. It will be the front line that will be completely annihilated if, God forbid, there is a conflagration between the two entities of NATO and Russia. And that's why I want to prevent war at all costs. And I feel so passionately about this. I took my beloved daughter, my 9-year-old daughter, this summer on our summer holiday to a place called Piaski, which is on the border between between Poland and the Kaliningrad Oblast. And you can't actually get to the border. You've got to park your car miles away, walk through a long forest, and then walk along a beach for about 6 kilometers before you get to the Russian-Polish border. And we walked together, arm in arm, on a very long walk, and I took her there. And the photograph that I have on my phone is my daughter standing on the Russian-Polish border. It's actually empty on the Russian side. There's only just a little sort of wire, very flimsy wire fence, obviously watchtowers and everything. But I said to her, you have to see the front line, because this is the area that will be destroyed if there's ever a conflagration. And I believe that when we don't have debates in the House of Commons, that is when we have strategic errors are made. And unfortunately, I have to tell you that there is very little debate in the House of Commons about Russia, because it is universally hostile and suspicious of Russian motives. A very senior member of the government called me Comrade Kawczynski when I asked the previous Prime Minister as to what he was going to do personally to lower tensions with Russia. I won't tell you who that person was, but that is the sort of derision that you get if you dare even to tackle this issue in the House of Commons. If you are a Russophile, if you understand the geopolitical importance of Russia and you want to debate the issue, you are described as either a Putin apologist or in the pay of the Russians somehow. Those are the things that are thrown at you. This morning, I asked the new Trade Secretary, the man responsible for instigating our trade agreements in the post-Brexit era, Liam Fox, a very good friend of mine. I voted for him in the leadership campaign in 2005. I asked him, would he, I said to him on the floor of the House this morning, bearing in mind that many British companies still trade with Russia despite the sanctions and are investing in Russia, and bearing in mind that post-Brexit we're going to have the opportunity of signing bilateral trade agreements, and bearing in mind that we have to now start preparing for a post-sanctions relationship with Russia, will he appoint a prime ministerial trade envoy to Russia to start that work? Now, if you go on Parliament TV, you will see his answer, but it was rather derisory. And most of his answer centered on the fact that, yes, well, we may consider this when President Putin stops his aggression. And that is a huge mistake, because that is always the answer that we get. But think for a moment at the lack of leadership that our country has given towards the Minsk II agreements. It was France and Germany. Oh, I have to stop. I'm going to talk about France and Germany. I've got much more to say, but France and Germany that showed the leadership on this. So I have to stop. I have much more to say, which I'd like to disseminate during the course of the questions. But I've come here really, basically, to talk to you today because I think the time has come for us to create a caucus in this country to take on the anti-Russian hysteria that is pervading through our political and media circles. And I look forward to the discussion.
Stephen.
Hi, my name is Steve MacVicar, and I am the founder, publisher, and editor of Eurasian Business Briefing, which is a website I set up partly to promote commercial ties between Russia and the West. Unfortunately, I launched it a month before the annexation of Crimea, so my sense of timing isn't brilliant. I also, like a lot of other people, called the general election and the referendum wrong, so I'm not quite sure I'm ideally equipped to give you any sort of crystal ball gazing about the future after Brexit. But I do have a few observations to make which might be relevant. The first is that there has always been a disconnect between what politicians decree and how business responds to market forces. And what has been going on in Russia since the imposition of sanctions proves the point. Just this week, for instance, IKEA announced it was going to spend $40 million on setting up a new factory in Novgorod. And it now looks like Renault is almost certain to take 70% holding in Avtovaz and the Lada production line by the end of the year. In the meantime, there's a group of major Western oil companies, including Shell and E.ON, who seem ready to carry on with the construction of a second gas pipeline under the Baltic Sea between Russia and Germany, despite opposition from Brussels and particularly Warsaw and Kiev. So the point I'm trying to make really is that if there is a commercial opportunity, business will find it and pursue it, whatever Westminster or the EU says. Post-Brexit, I think the short-term commercial opportunities will remain the same as they are now until the TANAP pipeline starts pumping gas from the Caspian Sea to Europe and eventually the UK. Britain will still need Russian oil to meet both industrial and domestic consumption. Although we're considerably less dependent on Russian oil than many Central and Eastern European countries, Russia still accounts for up to 10% of the gas and around 7% of the oil that we consume. But Russia still needs all the world-class technology and expertise that UK business can offer in upgrading its industrial infrastructure. Over 70% of its engineering sector's capital assets are considered to be outdated. Russia is clearly going to need as much help as it can get to diversify its economy. Oil and gas exports currently account for well over 40% of its GDP, and despite the major developments underway on the Yamal Peninsula and in Sakhalin in the Far East, exploration, drilling and transportation in and from Russia's more remote and hostile environments is becoming extremely cost intensive, and the country is probably going to run out of the hydrocarbons that it makes economic sense for it to extract within the next 30 years. It cannot be in anybody's interest for the Russian economy to implode, because it's, as you say, it's a worst case scenario really for the frontline states among others. And it seems to me that there's a golden opportunity for members of the British business community that is no longer beholden to Brussels to sit down with their Russian counterparts and discuss how they can help them to tap into their vast reserves of intellectual capital as well as their natural resources, and to create some alternative sources of revenue. While the oil reserves last, the petrochemical sector looks underdeveloped, and Russia's long-standing commitment to science and R&D would make the biotechnology and pharmaceutical sectors a good place to start, with the renewable energy sector not far behind. But wherever the conversation leads, it needs to begin soon, Brexit or no Brexit.
Thank you very much, Steve. And last but by no means least, Anna. You want me to move the slides, please? Oh, no.
Yeah, I've got it. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Anna. I'm presenting here at Russian National Tourist Office. And today you probably will know a lot of things about UK and Russia opportunities as well as the challenges. but I would like to talk in particular about travel to Russia and why it's essential for the business. You are here because you're interested to know about all the opportunities, and professionals believe that face-to-face meetings are vitally important when you're doing business in Russia. 47% of professionals said that they have lost the business just for the reason that they didn't have a contact, a face-to-face meeting with a client or supplier. And personal meetings and the personal contact as well, is very, very much important in Russian culture. So now the first few challenges our customers usually experience when they start doing business in Russia. It's first of all, it's arranging Russian visas because it might be quite time-consuming and hassle process. Obtaining business invitations and all supporting documents for the visa. Again, additional research has to be done and additional time has to be spent to do that. Search for accommodation, flights, transport, and of course the time management. When you're planning the meetings with the clients or suppliers in Russia, it's very much important to be on meetings on time. You don't want to stuck in the traffic, and some of them probably know how traffic is terrible in Moscow. So all of the reasons, it's kind of very, very much important. And also when you create the business plan or just have any ideas of doing business, you have to bear in mind certain budget to be spent for the travel arrangements, visas and flights, and etc. So now Russian National Tourist Office is one of the UK leading travel management companies for outbound trips to Russia. So we promote Russia as a destination for both leisure and the corporate sectors, as we are primarily focused on one particular destination. So we operate since 1997, and our mission is basically to provide you the walkable, cost-effective travel solution for your business in Russia and help you to conduct your business without any issues. So that's why we carefully plan your trip throughout the year, planning the costs, do the tailor-made proposal based on the frequency of your travel, and very, very much important thing what we provide the full visa services in our office on Notting Hill Gate, and we are only one travel management company in the UK who actually has the biometric machine in place stationary, which means that you can come to our office and do everything basically in one place. You don't have to visit the consulates, embassies, etc. And also the very, very big benefit in what we do, because we have up-to-date information and knowledge, we know what the regulations are and all sorts, so we can help you to arrange the visa on time and in a time-consuming process. So it's very, very, very effective. Also, what we have, so it's all kind of travel services, flight department, accommodation. We do the very, very good contracts and special deals and rates with the majority of airlines such as British Airways and Aeroflot. We provide a 24/7 assistance and accommodation in any part of Russia, transfers, all the kind of services. If you need any help, you're very, very welcome to contact us. Translation service and legislation, if you need prior to meeting, to translate any document, not to reauthorize that, or we can do that as well. So that's my speech. It's quite short, but very welcome any questions from your side.
Thank you, Anna. Well, I'd like to thank our panelists first of all for their opening remarks. We're going to move over now to the floor, where I think one of the main themes that sort of come out of this evening is that yes, there are possibly some sort of technical, there are certainly some good technical sort of issues, challenges that we need to overcome to improve business with Russia post-Brexit. But also there's of course that political argument, there's also the political issues and the wills there as well. So what I'd like now to do is, who would like to ask a question? If you could just give me a show of hands, please. Just one for the moment. We'll start off with you.
Hi, my name is Fred Clifton. I'm a lawyer. A political question. On the one hand, Britain is perhaps the most anti-Russian country in the EU, you might say, or one of the most anti-Russian, it's certainly one of the countries within the EU that's pressed the hardest for Russian sanctions. But on the other hand, Britain outside of the EU is going to trade more. So what is Britain's stance towards Russia going to look like once we leave the EU? Are we going to be more anti-Russian because perhaps outside the EU we won't be restrained by countries like Germany and Italy that have closer trade links, or are we going to want to trade more with Russia and therefore sort of tone down the rhetoric?
Okay, sorry, who are you directing your question to? To the panel.
Well, I think that let's put our cards on the table. I mean, there is extraordinary suspicion of Russia in the House of Commons at the moment, and as I alluded to at the beginning of my speech, there are just a handful of us who are trying to start a debate on this issue. An important thing is that on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, we are currently now undertaking an extensive report on Anglo-Russian relations. We visited Moscow in June. We are due, I am leading another delegation in November after the Duma elections. So, and by the way, if you're interested in that report that we're going to be publishing shortly on Anglo-Russian relations, I will be sending a copy to Nicholas, and I'm sure he will disseminate it to you. Because it's very important that you start to see for yourselves the way in which we are starting to challenge our own government as to the practicality of their existing policy vis-à-vis Russia. And I am very encouraged by what Boris Johnson said recently. Just the other day, he said that a solution in Syria can only be achieved or will be augmented with the support of Russia. Now, that's the first time I've heard any British politician acknowledge the fact that, given Russia's position on the UN Security Council, given the fact that we in the West have messed up Iraq, Syria, Libya, and everywhere else, and that we need to cooperate with the Russians, we need to start to get into a new relationship whereby we are working with them as with mutual respect, joint partners on the UN Security Council to deal with these existential threats. Given the fact that Boris Johnson has said this, I'm very encouraged that he could have what it takes, both he and Theresa May could have what it takes to finally start to engage with Russia in a more effective way. So I'm quietly hopeful that post-Brexit, this is achievable, but people like you, if I may suggest, this is why I've come here today, it needs to be the British people need to lobby their parliamentarians and to challenge them directly as to why hitherto there has been such a confrontational approach towards Russia. And by the way, no scrutiny whatsoever of Ukraine. There is no scrutiny of deficiencies in the Ukrainian government, no scrutiny in allegations that the Russians tell us about what Ukraine are doing. It's all very one-sided.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you for the question. Anybody else? Anyone else like to ask a question? Kevin at the back, please.
Yeah, my name's Dr. Waste management background.
Can you speak up a bit? Sorry.
My name's Dr. Kevin Cordes. I come from a waste management background in the Middle East. Not working there, we've had trouble trying to do business with Iran because of sanctions, much to the annoyance back here with the British Iranian Chamber of Commerce. Is there a continued perception that there is the hand of America pushing the anti-Russian sentiment, and along with the Entente Cordiale with France, we developed Concord and then the Channel Tunnel businesses to try and develop a super project between our two countries to try and break this ridiculous political logjam.
So yeah, would you like to kick off?
It's a pretty political question. We usually don't speak politics here. What I said, I love the picture which Ben showed us with Mr. Putin and Ms. May.
Can we have that on?
So
That's what it's all about.
that's the only hope I have. And we are waiting. Actually, we spoke a lot about this in my chamber, and as I said, we're waiting for further development and warmer attitude towards Russian business, politicians, towards Russia in general. Because when you open the newspaper, I love to read FT, and you might see what's going on there. So that's need to be changed.
Thank you, Sergei.
What I would say is, I came here with somebody, a friend of mine gave me a lift here, who's a very staunch Russophile, and we were just talking about how just extraordinarily, and I'm not just saying this to pander to the Russians here, but how extraordinarily intelligent these people are. And whether you look at mathematicians, what they've achieved in maths, science, some of the best chess players in the world, I mean, these are very, very bright people. And if we could collaborate with them on a project which you talk about, a la Concord, I think that would be magnificent. And I think that would send a huge sign to the governments of both countries, that in reality, what the people want is peace and cooperation. The politicians screw it all up by being confrontational and aggressive towards one another and suspicious. But the people, if you go on the streets of Moscow, as I have done, or if you talk to people in my own constituency of Shrewsbury, people want to cooperate. They want to be able to trade. They want to be able to engage. So yes, I can see great opportunities for that. And if you have any proposals on what that joint project could be, I'd be very interested to hear it, because we need.
Looking at it, as you say, it's a three-way issue. This a little bit, I think so.
Okay, John Bonner. Earlier this year, in the months of June and July, I spent basically both these months in the far east of Russia, in the Primoria Krai region. I met lots of Russians there on the ground and in homes and everywhere else. And all these people are receiving uncensored television, showing exactly what Daniel said earlier, British aggression and confrontational attitudes towards Russia. And their attitude, and what they asked me, was overwhelmingly, what are you British afraid of? Because they see this confrontational, aggressive stance as being based on fear. So I would ask all the panel what they see as being what the British politicians, certainly, parliamentarians, are afraid of from Russia. What are they afraid of?
If we can answer the question, but with a slant, if possible, not study the question on Brexit and that relationship and the potential opportunities. So we have the political question, but how that can also impact our potential opportunities.
Well, I would say that actually it's interesting that you talk about BBC, because this afternoon I was doing an interview on RT, which is one of my pet favourite channels, I have to say. And I go on RT about probably 2 or 3 times a month. And again, other British politicians are bewildered that I want to be interviewed by RT. I'm very grateful that RT are operating in our country. I think they give an incredibly different perspective to global situations than the BBC. And if I had £1 for every time I had a disagreement with the BBC over their coverage of certain issues, I'd be a very wealthy man. Interestingly, I think I was told that the BBC is watched by millions of Russians. The BBC World Service is watched by millions of Russians. So to say that there are these huge media restrictions in Russians is far from the truth, because the BBC is given very extensive, unfettered access to the Russian market. But to answer your question, look, I mean, why are they suspicious? They're suspicious. I'll tell you why they're suspicious. Because they're lemmings. And politicians will go for the path of least resistance. They will go for what is fashionable, because it's easier. And it's very easy at the moment it's very fashionable to be anti-Russian, and it's very fashionable to be thinking that they have malign motives. And it will take people like me and others who are not afraid to stand up to the status quo to keep challenging those at the top to change their stance towards Russia. Because at the end of the day, what I said to politicians in Poland, and this is important because anybody who's a father here, for them it's very important, I said to them, what you are doing is basically helping to create on the Russian-Polish border the equivalent, we're moving towards a situation not too dissimilar to the demarcation line of North and South Korea. And if it continues on that trajectory, there will come a time when it's going to be increasingly difficult to pull back from that situation. And that is something that should send shivers down all of our spines, quite frankly.
Sorry, Slava, you're next, and then Fred, and then sorry, lady in the back. Okay.
Yeah, I would like to ask Daniel about actually BBC, because today I've read that BBC are going to contribute to the report that you've mentioned, and that they were concerned that RT's ratings are very, very high in the UK, and they would like to have some money or more budget for BBC worldwide to cover Russian-speaking audience. Do you think they want to be more engaged in Russia, because now UK and Russia have obviously established a dialogue? The rhetoric is
from different in sort of spies or placements. These are highly skilled professionals who are doing a very important job, who may convey the news in a different way to the BBC, but thank goodness that they do. If we were to have a system where the BBC was omnipotent in the United Kingdom, I think some of them would like us to go back to those days in the 50s and 60s where there's only the BBC. That would be appalling. We need to ensure the next generation has as much information, as diverse information as possible. And so RT is here to stay, and I'm a great supporter of RT. I'm actually hoping to host a reception for RT in the House of Commons. And already some members of Parliament are trying to warn me off and say that that would be inappropriate. But this is the level of suspicion and confrontation that we have, but we must keep challenging him.
Thank you very much. Right, in total we have another 13 minutes left. So if we can keep the answers to a minimum and the questions to a minimum, we'll get through as many as possible. Next question, please. Sorry, there's a lady at the back in red. The lady in red at the back. And Fred. Then gentleman, then Gil.
Caroline Russell, CNS. I'm a lawyer. My question is, we're talking lots about suspicion and sentiments and whether a group of people who are interested in UK-Russia relations. And quite often the British press reports on the investment opportunities for those in Russia being taken up in Britain. Now, since we have a panel of experts here, what would you say should be the top areas of investment for UK businesses in Russia? And how would you assure the people, whether they be suspicious or not, that Russia has taken steps to encourage UK investment into Russia?
Would you mind actually if I take this question? And then I'm thinking, Sergei? Firstly, I would say some of the key areas that I've seen in terms of, sorry, I know it's not to do for the chairman to jump in, but just want to put my 5 eggs in. I would say particularly sort of areas like agriculture, infrastructure, high-end oil and gas engineering. There are a vast number of areas that are really open for business. And also in terms of consumer product manufacturing. I mean, I think there are excellent opportunities, particularly from some of the presentations and some of the professionals that I've spoken to, in terms of things like tax breaks, tax incentives, and also a lot of practical support that's available to British businesses. But I think, yeah, there are certainly some very strong areas. But that's me done.
There are plenty of areas. Brits are very good in design, in construction, in let's say airport design. There plenty of such kind of inquiries. The most important thing that now is the time for quality. Russian people are very ambitious, and Russians love quality. We have very strong word expression, like we don't buy cheap stuff, we buy expensive stuff because we don't have too much money. That is why when you do business or you plan business, you must rely on quality. So that should be a quality. Let's say I had an inquiry from British company. They deliver pipes, plastic pipes, to the Russian market, and just because of this ruble devaluation, they met kind of difficult situation, but they switched to high quality details, not just regular pipes, because this time has gone. It should be something with high quality, and they are well now.
Thank you, Raj. The gentleman at the back, please.
I've got a question on Russia's desire to do a trade agreement with the United Kingdom. Would it come as Russia directly doing the trade agreement with the UK, or is it more likely to come through the Eurasian Economic Forum? Which sort of way round?
Well, it is for Russian economy on this. But I think they may well do it through the EU, whatever, the Eurasian Union, because they are trying to position that as a counterbalance to the EU anyway. So it might be politically expedient and a smart move to do it through the Union. But it'll be Russia calling the shots. So.
Can I just answer? I mean, one thing that we can assure you is, and by the way, you know, I'm delighted to tell you that I was one of only 130 Conservative MPs campaigning for Brexit, and I'm delighted and thrilled that the British people had the courage and the wisdom and the vision to vote for Brexit. Some people may disagree with me in this room, but what we are now finding is that people are queuing up to do trade deals with us, given the strength of our reputation and brand. Just yesterday we had representatives from the GCC countries in the Middle East very keen to do a trade deal with us. Australia, China. And so many countries want to do a bilateral trade deal with the United Kingdom. I'm not sure whether it will be Russia to Britain or whether it will be through that regional association. It will probably be a mix going forward, and that will all be up for negotiation. But to the lady's point, it's difficult to find a sector which isn't appropriate for bilateral cooperation. And what you will find is the extraordinary enthusiasm if you try to attempt to engage with the Russians. I represent a very agricultural seat, and I sent one of my cattle farmers to a place called Bryansk, and he came back with 15 of their top agronomists to Shrewsbury, and those discussions led to the Russians rescinding their ban on British beef, which they implemented after the BSE crisis. That would have been worth over £350 million a year to the United Kingdom, all of which has now been lost as a result of the sanctions. So what I'm saying to you is engage with Russia, go to Russia, engage with Russia, and you will be amazed at their hospitality and determination to engage with us in an effective way in terms of trade.
Thank you, Raj. Right, we have two more questions, very short questions if possible, because we have a drinks reception starting in 7 minutes. So, Fred, over to you.
Fred Nasri, some people have posed the question of
what explains the totally irrational sort of, I call it Russian hating and so on. And I'm just wondering to what extent it can be explained quite simply with the border states. Firstly, the breaking of the Gorbachev promise, alleged promise. Secondly, that as far as Brexit is concerned, one of the main issues of the 52% of the population who voted that way was immigration. From which countries? Thirdly, that NATO expansion, whoever is driving it, is situated in these border states, putting missiles on the border and things like that. And that after Brexit, I wonder whether this is a potential opportunity for all this to change.
Who are you directing your question to? Because across
Anyone.
Who would like to answer that question? Keeping it short. Thanks, Rich. Who would like to answer the question?
I'll say something. The people who wanted to prevent us from instigating Brexit, I'll never forget what they said. The only person who wants Brexit is President Putin. That was their mantra. This evil man, I mean, he's almost portrayed as a pantomime villain. This evil man wants us to vote for Brexit because then that weakens Europe and then they can pounce on us. The reality is, the Russians, I don't believe the Russians have malign motives. I believe that Russia wants peace and doesn't want confrontation with NATO, doesn't want confrontation with the Baltic states, doesn't want confrontation with Central and Eastern European states. I've challenged Russian foreign ministers on this in Moscow, and they said, we have enough on our plates in our own country without trying to invade countries in Europe. And this is what really worries me, because we are hurtling towards confrontation without trying to pause for a moment to see things from the Russian side. It's very easy to talk about what the Russians are doing, but when we were flying back from St. Petersburg after our trip there as part of our inquiry, what fascinated me is just how quickly from St. Petersburg we entered Estonian airspace. NATO is moving closer and closer towards Russia, with more and more missiles pointing at Russia. Of course Russia is going to retaliate. Russia has been invaded. I talked about the suffering of my countrymen in Poland during the Second World War. Let's not forget, and this is a very emotive issue, the extraordinary suffering that the Russian people went through during the Second World War, the annihilation and destruction of their country. Those sort of memories are not erased for generations to come. These people remember that, they want to protect themselves, but they want to engage with Europe.
Thank you very much. One last question.
No, being very pragmatic. Like, if you think about the Brexit and the way that Brussels will be treating United Kingdom after the Brexit, it's clear that they will be pushing to a very bad agreement with the United Kingdom in order to send a statement for the other countries that can be potentially in the future leaving the European Union. It's not time to United Kingdom to be pragmatic and see in Russia one good trade partner that can open China, can open the Asia, and can open several countries that Russia has as partners today to the United Kingdom. Daniel.
Well, what a brilliant question! I mean, if you want to engage with some of the stars, what a better partner than the Russians? I mean, the Russians, this is their sphere of influence. Russia knows very well Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. The sort of relations that the Russians have with these countries is second to none. And if we could partner up with Russia, the opportunities are absolutely phenomenal. But let me just end by saying this. One of the reasons I voted for Brexit is because of the immigration issue. I'm an immigrant to this country myself. The United Kingdom has always benefited from migrants coming to our country, but that has to be managed. And one of the greatest things that we have in our country, which I am so proud of, And if you look at Poland, nearly 1 million Poles have now come from Poland to the United Kingdom. Poland is starting to suffer as a result of the brain drain of their highly skilled people leaving Poland in their droves, coming to live in Britain. And we are struggling to accommodate the sheer numbers. So yes to immigration, but we must manage it.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to end on this point and thank our panelists very much, not only for their questions, but also questions and answers, but also their opening statements, and also thank you, the audience, for your great participation this evening, and to those that are watching at home and watching live. Just to really summarise before we move into the other room for a glass of wine, one of the overwhelming sort of feeling that I get from today's discussion is that there is a great will, not only within the UK and Russia, within businesses, people that are at the coalface trying to do it themselves, that are really out there, frankly, struggling to work with Russia, to build their businesses here, and to so I would like to say once again, thank you very much to all that came this evening. It's been a very interesting discussion. It has been recorded. We'll circulate the link afterwards. And I'd like to invite you all into the next room where we can have a glass of wine. Thank you very much to our audience. We'll circulate the link afterwards. And I'd like to invite you all into the next room where we can have a glass of wine. Thank you very much to our audience.